My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make these moments of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, Jesus, I don't know that I've always found it like this, but nowadays I'm really happy every time I get to a part of the gospel where I see your strength. I think it's one of the tragedies of our faith in these times that we've been sold an overly soft and sappy image of you, someone all too sugary sweet, which in and of itself wouldn't be so bad, but for the fact that it carries with it this sinister trait in the background of being someone spineless, someone who didn't have strength. It's that negative way in which people can see meekness and humility, as if that meant being someone who just lacked the guts to do anything else. I think it's a real problem because us Christians can all too easily feel like we're on the back foot, and we don't like to come out fighting. I'll say something which I think will resonate with a lot of people joining in our prayer today. There are so many times when people feel a need to hide their faith. They feel as if it's something defective, something even to be ashamed of. And when things come up in social settings, well, it can just be hard to say what we really believe. It's crazy, right? Because we should most certainly not have that impression of our faith. And I think it's a defect that we have to try to conquer. But not just that we have to try to conquer individually, but as the whole people of God. Our faith is truth, pure and simple. And we should be so proud to be able to talk to other people about it. Well, anyway, I think I've already got distracted. You know how much this topic means to me. I would love to see so many Christians freed from that feeling of unworthiness and even of shame. But back to contemplating you. The thing that set me off in my prayer wasn't even something that you said, but the reaction that some people had to it. Today's gospel begins. After hearing his doctrine, many of the followers of Jesus said, "This is intolerable language. How could anyone accept it?" On occasions, to be fair, we think that we have to hide the truth in order for faith to be attractive to people. But quite the opposite is true. Truth itself is genuinely attractive, even though not everyone can accept its fullness at any given moment. So you could have said anything to those souls, any element of the truth that you are and that you came to explain to humanity. There are always some who aren't in a position to accept it. But we can't let ourselves be governed by them, because there are many who can accept it, and even who long for it. But what was it like for those souls to look at you at that moment? They were followers of yours. They had seen you talk. They had seen you work miracles. They must have been drawn by your words, by the freedom that came from hearing exactly your truth. How many times did they contemplate your face as they heard the words of life coming forth from your lips and into their own hearts? How many times did they end their days thinking, marveling over what they had seen and heard? And then, what was it that they saw when they looked up at you this time? Somehow, with what you said, they just weren't ready to accept it. Your face, to be fair, must have looked different to them at that time. It wasn't a different face. It couldn't have stopped being the loving face of Jesus Christ, your face. But it became a face that called them to something that they weren't able to handle. And yet, people are longing for truth, especially in our times that are so devoid of it. Lord, I think it's astonishing that one of the greatest apostles of the 21st century isn't even Christian. Now, some people might be scandalized to hear me say that, but as long as it's just you and me praying here, I'll say it as I see it. I look at a guy who isn't even Christian, like Jordan Peterson, and I'm amazed at how many people come to the faith through him. And what does he do? He doesn't have to get up and proclaim the gospel exactly. What is it that people find so attractive in what he says? It's just that he says the truth without trying to disguise it, and without being ashamed of it. And people latch on to that and discover all truth. In the end, they discover truth itself. They discover you. Heck, I can think of so many people I've met, I'm not talking about hundreds, but I'm talking about quite a few, who have ended up discovering you after they had discovered truth in the words of Jordan Peterson. It's crazy. This guy isn't even a Christian, and he's doing a better job of leading people to you than most of us are. Well, I think we've got something to learn from that. Sometimes it's so easy, all too tragically easy, for us to lose sight of the fact that the truth is so beautifully attractive. I remember once, quite some time ago, I walked into a meeting with a group of priests at a time in which I happened to be working in a school which taught the faith really well, taught the faith as it is, without watering it down, without debasing the truth with soft and sappy things that are just an excuse for not actually believing or living it. I was pretty lucky to work there, actually. It was a fantastic place. Anyway, I walked into this group of priests, and then one of them, as I walked through the door, points to me, and I don't know what the topic of conversation was at the time, but at that very moment he says, "And you know why people are smashing down the doors to get into that school?" Pointing to me as seemingly I somehow represented the school at which I was lucky enough to work. And anyway, he continued, "Because they tell the truth!" Well, actually, he was right. It was exactly like that. People were knocking down the doors to get into that school. Thankfully, there are many people who dare to tell the truth, much like that priest himself, who no doubt saw how people long for it. And he was determined to help the people entrusted to his care by telling them truth in all its goodness. But at the same time, of course, while we have an obligation to speak the truth, we don't have the obligation to speak it in the same way at every opportunity. That means we can never speak it in a militant fashion. It's about communicating the truth in the same way that you did, Lord, and, well, that can be tricky. For some of us, that means that we have to learn to be a little more daring. For others, it means learning to be a little more patient, more respectful, more charitable. We know that the truth finds its place in the head, but many times it has to get there through the heart. Lord, teach us, your disciples, your apostles of the 21st century, to be masters of humanity, well skilled in the arts of both reaching head and heart. But anyway, the gospel goes on. Jesus was aware that his followers were complaining about it and said, "Does this upset you? What if you should see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh has nothing to offer. These words I have spoken to you are spirit, and they are life." Well, Jesus, I wish more people realize how much your words, truth itself, give freedom and life. Those poor souls, as they walk away from you, they leave those things behind. And then you turn to your apostles. I do wonder what the expression on your face was at that time, as you could probably still see those others turn their backs and return to the unhappiness and emptiness that you had called them from. So you turn to the disciples with that face that we can only imagine and ask, "What about you? Do you want to go away too?" Simon Peter answered, "Lord, to whom should we go? You have the message of eternal life, and we believe. We know that you are the Holy One of God." And dear Jesus, we could say the same thing. To where would we go? With all these crazy ideas around nowadays that seem somehow so attractive to believe just simply because we all have the inclination to believe what everyone else does, we realize, to whom would we go? What would we get from all of that if we gave ourselves over to those crazy ideas? We know that it's better to have the truth than to proclaim the emperor's new clothes with everyone else. And for those praying with me, if you don't know the story, just Google it and you'll find out. Well, Lord, there's more life with truth, and that is where we want to be. Now, Mother Mary, in heaven, ordinarily would celebrate the feast of your queenship today. Help us in a special way to let truth reign in our lives, to let it give us true freedom, and help us also to set others free with this gift of truth that has been given to us. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations which you have communicated to me in this time of prayer. I ask your assistance in putting them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.